Yeah, I guess it's like Philippine themed in here. It's nice and hot. If you like the Canadian cold theme, you can go next door where it's nice and cold and comfortable. So this is locking down macOS without locking up users, the sequel. I've done a lot of emojis because I want to stay connected to the inside of myself. I think that's how you're supposed to talk in 2017. But I didn't know how to say the sequel in emojis, so I'm sorry about that. Hello. A little bit about myself. I am a security engineer at Airbnb, focusing on mostly our client endpoints, our Macs, those few Windows machines that we might pretend that we don't have, but they're always out there. And most recently, Chrome OS. I'm a former but still Mac admin at heart, and so pretty much everything in my mind comes back to the Mac. I apologize if I forget half of the things I'm supposed to say. The jet lag is finally catching up to me. This is the route I've taken in the last week. I left Manila and flew really all the way around the world to get here. So I'm now tired, and yeah. So why this talk? So this is the sequel to a talk that I gave at Penn State 4 years ago, which was called Locking Down OS X Without Locking Up Users. And I still get a lot of questions about that talk. It was very popular for some reason, but what that talk was basically about was I was like a one-man show, and all I could do to stop all the problems was take away admin rights from my users. But when I did that, this was 2013. There's a lot of things they couldn't do on their machines. They couldn't install software updates. They couldn't change printer settings. They couldn't do all this stuff. So the talk was basically about editing the authorization database. And the best part about that talk was all the technical part of it broke 3 months later. So I still get questions all the time like, hey, I'm trying to edit my authorization database and it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, it still works, but you have to use a security command. You can't go and edit the SQLite database directly anymore. I think that's what it was. Or it was a giant plist, and now it's a SQLite database, I think. So this talk is what am I doing 4 years later? Back then, all I could do was, implement something, and I don't really have any insight into my machines. But now, 4 years later, there's all these tools, there's these cool ways to ensure that, your machines are in a safe state and do it in an easy way, and be able to know that you're actually in that part. So, part one, I didn't know what the part emoji was. I really need to connect more. So part one is this. If you can't guess what this sentence is, it's painting a picture of a secure Mac. I thought that's what it would mean. So I don't think that guy. I can't grow a cool mustache like that, but anyways, so there's a lot of things you can do to secure your Mac. You can go really crazy and do all this intrusion detection stuff, but really you should just start with the usual suspects. Basic security settings really go a very long way in preventing the most common problems, security problems that will pop up in an organization. And you can focus on these big holes because they're really easy to fill. You can solve most of your problems with not a ton of effort And if you want to put a lot of time into things, you can, but you know, you start to converge on this point where your return on investment of time is not going to be as great as it was in the beginning. And really the best part is these big holes mostly can be filled with things that are built into the operating system or with simple tooling. Like, you don't need to go and spend like months researching how to implement something. You can probably like get something close to off the shelf. So there's like a few, you know, basic things that you should do to like a managed Mac to make sure that it's going to be in a good state. And most of you probably do these things or some of these things already, and they're fairly obvious. So like the first one's like inbound connections. So like macOS ships with a whole bunch of ways to remotely control a machine. And back in the day, we would all have, you know, ARD on and VNC on and SSH on, because you might need them. But I don't know that we still need this stuff like enabled on every Mac, especially this like ARD VNC stuff. I definitely used to use that like 5-6 years ago, when that was the only way that I knew how to manage a Mac was through ARD, and every one of my Macs was listening for this stuff all the time. And it's all with a shared password. It's all like probably vulnerable to some things, and there's no great way to secure it. So if you don't need it, disable it. Like, I definitely understand that you need some kind of like VNC server running on, you know, some Mac Mini that you're running caching server on that's somewhere, that you don't have a monitor on it. But I don't think we're at the point anymore where you need this ARD enabled on every single laptop that you have floating around. It's not super useful anymore. It might be useful still, but you know, if you have a laptop that's at some Starbucks somewhere, you're not going to be able to connect to it anyways via this method, and it's just sitting there vulnerable. So if you do still need this stuff, that's fine, but I would very much use a firewall to restrict VNC to be run over SSH tunnel only. SSH is a lot more secure than Apple's VNC server, and it really offers, like, it's more performant, it'll be a better experience, and it's a lot more secure with an extra layer of authentication. So speaking of SSH, if you enable, I think it's called remote access in system preferences, that's OpenSSH, and it's enabled with passwords by default for all admin users on the machine. You can, so like, just again, your users' laptops are floating around at Starbucks, and I don't know how secure everybody's passwords are, but you know, someone sitting there next to them may be probing and trying to get into their machine over SSH, and that is bad. It's not implausible to be able to get into a machine via that method. So if you want to have SSH listening, I think that's very okay, as long as you disable password authentication in your SSHD config. This is pretty easy to do. You can use config management tools for this. You could use really anything for this. You could install this file with a package. Like, be careful with it. It's just one line you need to manage. But you can restrict SSH to come in via keys only. If you use Git, you're probably familiar with SSH keys at this point, as they're probably the most common method to communicate like with GitHub. So use that, protect your keys. That way you know, like someone would have to steal your SSH key off of whatever box it was on to be able to get into those machines. You can't just get in with a simple password. But like most of all, if you don't need these things, just keep them disabled. I like to have my management tools reaching out to servers. I don't really think that I'm ever going to be able to directly get into a machine with them floating all over the world. You know, inbound connections to laptops just like, they're not really feasible. They work great in, you know, a computer lab on a flat network, but you know, that's just not the way Mac populations are anymore. They're pretty much all one-to-one laptops. They're still computer labs. And ARD can still be useful in that, you know, to make sure that, you know, a teacher can watch their students, make sure they're actually doing their work. But, you know, what I'm talking about here is really laptops. So if you're not using it, just disable it. I don't have these things enabled on my machines anymore, although I do have restrictions set up so that, like, out of the box, the machine does not have SSH listening. It doesn't have VNC listening. But if someone did enable it, VNC is restricted to the loopback interface, and the SSH deconfig file is already configured in the right way. So there's no time at which, you know, a password could get right into those. Another usual suspect is Fileball. I mean, I'm sure you guys all know what this is by this point. You can watch many recordings of Rich talking about Fileball. So I'm not going to talk about the technical aspects of it. Like, it's full volume encryption. But like the point of it is, attackers, like, they want your data. If your laptops are all encrypted and you know, someone loses one or gets stolen, it becomes exponentially harder for them to get the data off of the laptop. It's not impossible. You know, there's really two ways to do it. You could go spend, you know, many millions of dollars on supercomputing to crack these, you know, Firewall passwords, or you can go fish them, which is not uncommon. But you know, this data leak is just like more opportunistic. You want to prevent the like common easy data leakage. If someone really wants your data, they're probably going to get it if they invest enough time into it. So if you use Firewall, like, and somebody loses their machine or it gets stolen, then, you know, you just write off the $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever the laptop costs. You know, that is significant, but for most organizations at this point, you know, a broken or missing laptop, it's not a huge deal. The data on there is much more important. So like, how much is your data worth? I would bet that it's worth a lot more than the laptop that it's on. You know, if my laptop disappears, it's fine. Like, it's unfortunate. I'll have to get a new one. But I don't really have a ton of worry that the files that are sitting on the disk are going to suddenly disappear and show up somewhere else. This might be different in like a K-12 educational environment. If you have like one-to-one Macs for students or something, the laptops are probably more valuable than the data. But again, I think the way that Mac deployments have shifted, they've gone into more, you know, corporate and government environments. So we got one more usual suspect. I think there might be another one. I'm very tired. I don't remember. So system integrity protection. This is a new feature that came out, I guess it's 2 years ago now. 1 year ago? I don't know. So it's a new feature in macOS that prevents the Apple shipping parts of the operating system from being modified. That's like the core of it that most people notice, is that you cannot modify files, system files anymore. And a lot of people are frustrated by this, like they want to go modify some file that Apple ships. Or like I've heard a lot of cases where you can't like delete the chess app, and you know, there's some corporate policy that you can't have games on your laptop, so people go disable SIP to delete chess or iTunes or like other things that come on the OS. It's a little silly, but this is a really great feature because not only does it protect these system files for modification, it does a lot of other things. And it looks like it's going to become a lot stronger in the next version of macOS with the Apple file system, where everything's really containerized and it's not just everything sitting on a simple file system. I think SIP's file system protections are really more of like a early warning of what will happen in APFS. I don't think you're going to be able to modify these files at all by turning off SIP anymore. You might be able to in like a hacky way, but it's designed to be, you know, a container of macOS, and it's really great. But really, like the better side of SIP that people don't really think about are the other protections that it provides, which is really against like cross-process communication. This does frustrate some developers who try to debug things like with dtrace, because you can't so much hook into processes anymore. Things are more sandboxed. You can selectively disable this part if you need to debug something, but it also prevents unsigned kernel extensions from being loaded. It's good, strong protections. If you're downloading applications off the internet, you don't really know exactly what everything they're going to do is. So with SIP, you generally know that you know, an application download off the internet is going to be run in this little sandbox, and it can't do completely horrible things. They can still do pretty bad things, but that will continue to get better. But I still see like a lot of people who want to disable SIP because they have some legacy thing that relies on installing in some location. Like, please stop doing this. It might be okay to disable like the file system protections. That might not be that big of a deal, but the other protections of SIP are really great and really important, and you really don't want unsigned texts getting injected into your machine. The next thing I want to talk about is macOS updates. So, I have a question. Is your entire fleet today currently running macOS Sierra? Raise your hand if 100% of your Macs are running Sierra. Working on it? Yeah. Okay. Well, so I guess that nobody's going to say yes to this one, which is your entire flight running 10.12.3 currently? You're working on it. So the point of this is that if you're not always running the latest version of macOS, you're always vulnerable. You know, Apple releases security updates all the time, and they are really important. You know, they have this page that you can go to, and it shows all the security updates that they release. But there's a couple key things here. So, you know, they have this section that says, like, get the latest software updates from Apple. And it says the latest version of macOS is 10.12.3. There's no, like, the latest version of macOS is 10.12.3 or 10.11.6 or 10.10.5. I don't know what it was. I guess it was 10.10.5. They do release some security updates for older operating systems, but you can really see at the bottom here that Sierra is a security update for these older operating systems. Like, Apple is not, they're not supporting the old operating systems anymore, like they used to when things were paid, when, the release cycle was 3 years and everything like that. So, like, they don't patch these old operating systems. You might get like a Safari update, they might fix like half the vulnerabilities that were in like 10.11 right when 10.12 comes out, but there are real vulnerabilities out here. And I think what you can really look to is iOS and how Apple does updates there. When iOS 10 came out, there are no further updates to iOS 9. I think there was like one iOS where there was an update release for a previous version, but that was only because hardware support was dropped. So you really need to be running the latest version of the OS. There's no reason to not be doing this anymore. If you have legacy stuff that won't run, then you need to like do the calculation of how much like security is worth to you. I would really advise you to dump legacy software that won't run on a modern operating system. And if you still like must run it because it's some ancient version of Cork that you can never upgrade from, or there's some educational software that will never run on a new version of macOS, consider running that in like virtual machines that are very locked down or something like that. But the operating system running on your real laptop needs to be the latest one, like as soon as it comes out. And I don't think there's any real excuse for that. It's very hard to communicate this at times because if you look at the security update release notes, you see like all this stuff about an attacker may be able to execute code at some level with some malicious code, but there's not a ton of like real world, like easy to understand exploits. Except like a month and a half ago, there was one that was really cool, which you may have seen. And this was an exploit about Fileball 2 password retrieval. And this is pretty cool. So the way that this worked is the computer keeps things in memory, it keeps encryption keys in memory, it keeps a whole bunch of stuff. And this attack used Thunderbolt to basically do a direct memory attack. And the way that it was done is you would like do like the hard reboot of the machine, the one where you hold down like the 4 buttons, like command. You hold down everything basically, and it just instant reboots the machine. And the problem was that when you do this, it doesn't actually clear out your system memory. So the encryption keys are still in memory. They're still able to be used to, unlock the disk. They haven't been erased from memory yet. They're not going to be used when the OS boots up. It clears out the memory. But because this reboots so fast, that stuff is still there. And so the attack was that if you had a Thunderbolt, it uses a Thunderbolt express card adapter along with a USB 3 debug kit. The Mac was not locking out Thunderbolt. It's supposed to lock out Thunderbolt when you boot. There was some stuff about option ROMs last year, but when you do this quick reboot, it was still unlocked. So if you had anybody's laptop that was sitting at a lock screen or sleeping, you could turn it, like just open it up, do the quick reboot, and then you could yank their Fileball Fileball password out of memory fairly quickly, and then you could do, target disk mode or something like that, copy their whole disk, put the laptop back where you found it, and then you could go do all their stuff. And the user would probably never know that this was done to them. They would come back and be like, why is my computer off? Or like, why is it at the login window? But, if I went to my bag and my laptop had rebooted, I'd be like, oh, there was like a software update, or, my battery ran out or something. I wouldn't think to report this to anybody. And you could perform this attack on pretty much anybody. Here's a closer picture. There's a whole video you can go watch. So anyways, Apple patched this, but they only patched it for all machines on Sierra. It needs a firmware update along with some software changes to be fully remediated. They did include the firmware update in, for some machines on some older operating systems, but really the only way to fully know that you're fully secure is by running the latest operating system and getting all the latest firmware updates and all of that. So, I know most of our machines, which are fairly newer, did not have the firmware update included in the update release for El Capitan. So there's so many more examples of this. I think this is a really good one because you can go buy the Express card and the USB debug kit, and anybody here that's not running at least 10.12.2, you could go, borrow their laptop for a little bit and get all their data. And I think that would be kind of fun. I did buy the hardware, and it does really work. The code's online. It's pretty cool. So TLDR, just update your operating systems already. There used to be this, maybe it was a misconception, maybe it was reality, that every time Apple would release a new OS, they would break Wi-Fi, they would break everything. You couldn't actually run the new OS until it was the .4 release or .3 release. And if you're doing that, then you're never going to be up to date. You're always going to be out of date, and it's going to be a bad time. So then there's third-party software updates. Ben just talked about auto package and monkey and jam jar and all this stuff. So I would say this is, I don't want to say it's not as important as OS updates, but I would put it at number 2, tied for first of things you should do. But you really need to keep your third-party software up to date. You might not be able to keep everything up to date, but you should really focus on high-risk applications that are very likely to be impacted with security problems. And these high-risk applications are usually things like web browsers, things that directly call out to the internet. Every single release of Chrome and Firefox and Safari has security fixes, and basically all of those security fixes are now known vulnerabilities. People know how to attack them. Plugins, Flash and Java, some people still have these installed. Thankfully, Java is going to stop working completely in more browsers soon, as NPAPI plugins are discontinued, which is great. And then also suites of products that are commonly used to open files off the internet. At Office and Creative Cloud, I would say, well, I would include Acrobat as part of Creative Cloud here, but Office is really important. It used to be that all these Word documents would come with macros, but that would only affect the Windows version of Office, so it was fine if you got it on your Mac, but there's another one in the wild just this morning. It's a malicious Word document. crafted for the Mac. I don't have all the details on it. I just saw it on Twitter like 20 minutes ago. So please keep these up to date. Like, it's not that hard. But like, back to what we were talking about with like VNC and SSH, like if you're not using these things, remove them. They're just sitting there as a liability. If you're not using Java, just remove it. If you're not using Flash, remove it. If you're not using Word, just like delete it from your machine. Delete it from the machines that don't use it. You might save on licensing costs too, but you know, remove these liabilities from your machines. You don't need to have every single piece of software that everybody might ever need ever on every machine. You know, people might appreciate the extra disk space too. So I've got some more emojis for you. This one is users with admin rights are okay. I don't know how I came up with this one, but it's users with admin rights basically in a one-to-one environment. Like, that's what I'm talking about the whole time, is like one-to-one environments. If you're running computer labs, like obviously you're not going to do this because you want the lab machine to be nice for the next person. You know, 4 years ago, I would be like, you know, if you don't have like a big team to be able to handle things, like don't give your users admin rights. Instead, give them a standard user account and selectively enable the things that they need to have in the authorization database. Today, I would say that doesn't really make a lot of sense anymore. Give your users admin rights. There's not a ton of reason to for them not to have it. It's more of a false sense of security. So really the reason for this is like, people think that if an attacker is going to come in, they're going to send you like a malicious package or something, and if the user's not an admin, then it can't do anything on the machine. But really, like, the goal of an attacker is not to install a rootkit on your machine and like own your Mac and use it for like mining bitcoins or something. I don't know. They want to obtain the data off of your machine. Like, I'm talking about like targeted attacks at you. But there's also like common malware that doesn't really need to run as root or run as an admin or anything like that. A user owns their own files, and they can run code as themselves. So a lot of crypto locker malware, which isn't really targeted but can cost you a lot of money and headaches, that only needs to run as the user. It can lock all their user files. Like, a crypto locker piece of malware is not going to go encrypt all your files in your applications folder. It's going to go lock your documents. It's going to lock your downloads. It's going to lock all that stuff. The things you actually care about. You can go like re-download Word, but you can't go re-download, you know, your thesis that you've been working on forever. You know, of course you should back things up, but you know, running code, basically like running code as users is all you really need to do. There's also root escalations out there for your, you know, machines still running 10.11 or 10.10 or whatever. If you really wanted to be root as a piece of malware. So yeah, I really think that like restricting admin rights is like this false sense of security. You think you like nothing bad can happen if users are admins. But the other thing is with this, if you give someone a laptop and they're not an admin, and you know it's encrypted in Fileball or whatever, if they have a password to unlock the disk, that means that they have everything they need to have admin rights, and your smart users are just going to go into the recovery partition and add themselves to the admin group. Like, it's not that hard. And I bet that you're not checking for that. So instead of taking away these admin rights, log when they're used, and just make sure that, you know, they're being used for the right things. in reality, like I don't escalate to a privileged account very often anymore. It just doesn't seem to be needed. So we log all this stuff. You know, you can do it through OnetoOne, and just see, you know, where things are escalating. It's not that big of a deal, and your users will be happier. Users don't want to go chase down a help desk or a sysadmin to like type in a password so that they can install their printer driver for their home printer. Like, just let them do that. It's not that big of a deal. I want you to embrace new security features. A lot of people are freaked out and they think that Apple's like trying to like repossess their Macs, because Apple wants to like own your MacBook with these new features, because they want to restrict everything you can do. Like, Apple still owns your MacBook and you're just a user of it. But really, Apple's just trying to provide a secure general computing platform for everybody. You can still run whatever you want to on your Mac. They're not trying to take it away from you. They are doing some things like to prevent malicious processes from doing malicious things. But if you're playing the game right, like, this shouldn't be a problem. So, like, don't worry about the skies falling. New features are going to cause some minor issues. You know, people used to install things in user bin. Now you have to install them in user local bin. It's not that big of a deal. And I think building it in the modern ways is easier to do than building in the old, long ways. Like, if you were following Apple's guides from the beginning, these new security features aren't going to impact you in any major way. And the way I like to think of this is like being full of containers. Like, if you're a developer, you're going to be able to ship like this little containerized app that runs in a sandbox. You can ship your dependencies more easily with it. It's easier to deal with bugs. It's pretty great. So, like, embrace these new features. Don't try to fight them. Don't disable them. Just work with them. They will help you, I promise. So, like, if you've given users admin rights and all this stuff, you really want to know what's going on. I would rather, at this point, know what's going on with my machines than pretend that I've done all this work and like think that I've solved every single problem. Because I can't know that what every attack is that's going to come in. It's just impossible. There's way too much. Like 4 years ago, there wasn't a ton of tooling to know what was going on in the Mac. You could like ship logs to a log aggregator and do all this manual stuff to them, but it wasn't amazing. So I think running blind at this point is like, you don't need to do it anymore. It's too easy now to be able to have some tools that can help you out in the right way. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to use some tools. We got a wrench and we got a hammer. I don't know what's what, but there's like all these tools out here. I'm only going to talk about like one basically that I think everybody could use, and that's OS Query. I think there might be a talk on OS Query here. It's very useful for a lot of use cases. You could go out and spend a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of engineering on like intrusion detection systems, and those things are very useful for some organizations, but I don't think they're for everybody. This is free, and it's going to give you a lot of information about your machine. If you're at all familiar with SQL, it's pretty easy to use. So here were some queries that I ran on my laptop this morning when I was updating this. And it's pretty easy. You can just like get information about your machine. There's a whole bunch of tables about a whole bunch of things, like launchd applications, You can even gather logs from Apple syslog with this, which is great. You can search for stuff. I use it for pretty much everything. So you have this data, I could set this first query up about Wi-Fi status to run, every time a network changes or every 10 minutes or something like that. And that's just like local on my computer. It's really useful data, but like, how do I do something useful with it? I want to ship it up somewhere. I want to be able to take some action. If somebody joins a network that I know that is bad, how do I do something with that? So there's there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I think there's two fairly easy applications for this. So the first one, there's Zentrol, which I think there's also a session on here. Today. Last session. You should go to the session, and it's pretty cool. I've played with it. It's pretty cool. I don't use it because we built our own thing to like do a lot more. But Zentrol is super cool. You can control OS query with it. You can just like ingest all this information. I'm not going to talk any more about it because there's a session about it. What I will talk about though is something that Airbnb's security team just announced last week, which is called Stream Alert. And what Stream Alert is a real-time analysis tool for data coming in from OS query and other sources. So you send like streams of data to it. You write some like matching alert, or you write rules to match some of this data, and if something matches, you can send alerts to different places. So here's that graphic in there. You can send information through from like OS query. You can pick up from a whole bunch of different places. You can send it like generic JSON. We use it with a lot of OS query data. It all runs on AWS with Kinesis and Lambda. There's no servers, and it's very inexpensive to run and scales very well. It's many billions of things we send through it all the time, and it scales just fine. So if you wanted to use this and like get an alert on something, here's what an example rule looks like. It's simple Python. The whole thing's Python. Like you can go look at it. It's not super complicated. It's very easy. So this one would apply to like a Linux server. Say you wanted to get alerted anytime someone sudoed on these servers that are tagged with PCI. So if you were like bound to PCI compliance stuff, and those servers are very important. You would have that data come in from OS query. It would go to Stream Alert, and you could be notified here. It would get logged into S3, and then you would instantly get a PagerDuty notification, and it would post in the Slack channel. You can have inputs and outputs go to all different places, but I really like this because it's really easy to write these rules and figure out like what you want to get alerted on. Like there's so much data coming in, it's just a very small percentage that you might want to alert or log or something on. And then everything else, you can discard or keep it around later and everything like that. I think I'm like at the time already, yeah?
Break time now.
Do we have break time? Okay, so I guess part 2 is for another day, but I didn't really know how long this was gonna take, so I'll just leave you with this slide, which is part 2, the important. And this was the emoji for it. but you'll just have to guess what that was. Maybe next year. So that's all I have. It's 11 o'clock. I'll post the rest of the slides.